Hi, this is Stanley Clarke, and I'm here with my band at the Montreal Jazz Festival, and having a great time. Yeah, we're going to play, you know, because of someone like me, I have so many albums and so many songs, it's difficult. I haven't yet made an album that sort of inspires me to play every song on the album. Maybe this new album that I'm doing has that. My new album is like, it's kind of a throwback to albums the way they were made in the 70s, where they're works. They're like complete works. It's not just modular, like this tune, then you go over here to that tune. It's like a progression. It has a lot of cohesiveness, and it has a trajectory within the album. And so the new album's like that. And that album, I could play all the tunes on that album. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to play stuff from the album Up. We're going to play stuff from some of my early albums, and a few things from the Return to Forever album, and then some other surprises too, you know. So that's what it is. There's a number of reasons for that. I mean, one is actually a jazz tradition. Actually even goes back to Africa too, which is you have to pass things down to the young. In the olden days, they didn't have universities and things like that, so things would have to be passed down, you know. And so in jazz music, and this happened to me when I played with Stan Getz, I was 18 years old. In many ways, I was younger than these guys. Although Becca, the piano player, started playing with me when he was 17. And it's good to train someone. Miles Davis did that. Tony Williams played with Miles Davis. I think was he 15 or 16, something like that. It's a very common thing because the survival of our music actually depends on that. It's something that you actually don't even, it always surprises me when someone brings it up because it's so natural. You know, I could not truly call myself a jazz musician if I didn't hire somebody that was young and train them, not just in music, but in, you know, social skills, business, and then there's all the various aspects of music, harmony, rhythm, camaraderie, how you play in a band, you know, just all these things in the hope that when that person has a band, they'll take some of the things that they've learned from me and others, and they'll have a band and they'll pass that on. And believe it or not, that's really how jazz music has lasted as long as it has. You know, we have another component now in the United States, and I believe all around the world, is jazz education is much greater than it's ever been. So a lot of those things, the only thing that's missing from the education in school is all the other social skills, you know, and in some ways certain aspects of music, because people are learning a language. Jazz music is a language, and within that language there are sub languages, like you have smooth jazz, straight ahead jazz, free jazz, all these things, and these languages. And you know, it's important that the musicians understand these languages, and the best way to get these languages are actually to play with the people that actually invented these languages or were associated with people that played with, you know, like, I feel really fortunate, like the man that taught me how to swing on the bass was Art Blakey. I played with Art Blakey for 1.5 years, and that's the thing that I'm the most proud of, more so than any band I've ever played with, is that I can call myself a jazz messenger, because there's only a few of us. You know, Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, the names go on. Lee Morgan, and I can't believe that I was a jazz messenger. You know, me and Chick Corea talk about it all the time because he's very proud. You know, because Art Blakey was really one of the pillars, cornerstones of the music. And, and I learned many things from him, good and bad. but the most important things were all good things, you know. So, and so that's important. So when I play with these guys, these young guys, these guys are aware of that. They know that I played with Art Blakey, Dexter Gordon, Horace Silver, and so they listen closely when I say things, you know, because I learned from these guys. That's the most important spot in the band for me. It's great that you picked that up. You might be the first guy that's ever asked me that question. Who knows? Hey, you know. But anyway, point being, that's the most important thing to me because the bands that I'm in, they don't work without a drummer that has this quality. He has to be a free spirit. Technique doesn't matter, even style doesn't matter, but he's got to be a free spirit, and what I mean by that is willing to turn on a dime. That's an old American saying, you know, you come, you're going down this road, and you got to be able to turn on a dime, boom, like that, and be willing to do it, and that turn may take you down into a tunnel that you've never been to before, or take you in a deep cave, but you have to be so sure and confident in yourself that there's an exit. There's a way to get out and get back, even if you have to turn around and come back. And that, to me, all my drummers have to be like ferociously brave. You know, I cannot stand a drummer who is complacent or just like too standard for my music. In other types of music, yeah, you know, it's fine if I'm playing. If I show up at a session, I'm playing on a pop album, somebody wants me to play bass, and the drummer can go boom, cat, and that's fine. If he does it well, great. But for my band and for my music, he has to have a bit of a wild streak. Yeah. There were three guys. I'd say my favorite one was Ron Carter. I think that Ron Carter was the greatest bass player in the last 50 years to come along. The other one was a bass player named Scott LaFaro. And Scott LaFaro, who played with Bill Evans, had such a unique and lyrical way of soloing on the bass. And then the other one was Richard Davis. And Richard Davis he had probably more technique than all those guys, but he was the wildest bass player. And I'm speaking of acoustic bass players now, just completely wild. And I heard a story that when Stravinsky used to come to New York, and they'd put the orchestra together, and they would always have Richard Davis in the bass section because he could read anything. I don't care what it is. I once hired Richard, and Richard, I mean, I was so embarrassed to call him. I was like maybe 19, and Richard was like Richard Davis. And I was playing with Joe Henderson, and I had to go, I booked 2 gigs on one night, and I had to do this other thing. And Lenny White, who was playing drums with Joe at the time, said, call Richard. I said, I can't call Richard, he's Richard Davis. And I called him up, and he said, sure, I'll come and sub for you. And I said, well, are you going to need a rehearsal? Or what? He says, I don't need a rehearsal. Is there music? Great, that's all I need is music. And according to Lenny, came and played everything down perfect. So I have a lot of respect for that guy. Now, the electric bass is another thing. My favorite electric bass players are Larry Graham and the bass player named Billy Cox, who played with Jimi Hendrix, James Jamerson and the girl, Carol Kaye. And the reason why I like those guys is because they invented things on the bass. They were like the first at something. I have a weakness for people that are original. When Coltrane died, I started playing saxophone, and I was considering giving up the bass and playing saxophone. And my friend Lenny White, the drummer, he tells the story best. I was so affected by Coltrane's death that I stayed in my little apartment in Philadelphia for like 3-4 weeks. In those days, that apartment was like $35 a month. So you could be a hermit. You could stay in an apartment for a year and no one would ever know. So I was there like for a while, and Lenny White knocked on the door. I opened up and I started playing the saxophone for him. And he said, forget it. This is never going to happen. You sound horrible, the bass. You know, I do so much music that it's difficult for me to actually sit down and say, now I'm going to listen to music. I have one of those old jukeboxes at home in my house. I used to always have a jukebox, and I found one, and I changed it to a CD jukebox. And so I put all these CDs in it, and 100 CDs. I don't even know what a lot of these things are in it. And when I'm at home eating sometime, or especially when I'm home alone, I'll just press some numbers, and it could be anything. And so I just listen that way. And sometimes my kids, who are no longer kids really, will bring over CDs of, oh yeah, check this out, check that out. And that's it. And then the rest is online. You know, you hear things. And there's so many places to access music now. It's amazing, actually. I like the French bass player Hadrien Feraud out of Paris. I love the bass player out of Chile, Christian Galvez. My favorite is a bass player called Thundercat, which is a bass player. His real name is Stephen Bruner, but his stage name is Thundercat, and he's the brother of a drummer that used to play with me named Ronald Bruner. So Ronald Bruner and Stevie Bruner, they come from a family, like everyone plays music, mother, father, and all the brothers. And he's my favorite because he plays the bass, he has as much technique as anybody, and he writes songs, he understands songs and melody. Those other guys are great bassists, but they're more into technique and they play the bass. I don't know whether they're songwriters. I've never really heard anything from them. But Stevie's like complete. So he makes records, he tours, a very, very exciting bass player. He's my favorite.
Thank